5, 4, 3. Hey everybody, this is John Wolpert and the big baseline crew for the General Assembly meeting that we do every month. Going to turn it promptly over to Sonal Patel to convene this meeting, and we'll be back. Did we decide, Sonal, if we're going to do next week or if we're going to take the week off? We're going to do next week, right?
For now, we will keep it on schedule.
So we'll see y'all next week for the regular baseline show with news and commentary from the baseline world. And now the agenda is yours, Sonal.
All right, so first we're going to discuss a new partnership that's going on in the baseline community with a few companies that have been involved for a while, and then we'll go through our normal General Assembly updates. So to begin, we have a guest joining us for the first time on the baseline show regarding a collaboration of Bloxmove, Unibright, and Concircle. So I'll hand over to Stefan from Unibright for an introduction.
Yeah, thanks, Sonal. Yeah, we're happy to announce a partnership of Unibright and Concircle with Bloxmove. And before we learn more about Bloxmove and the use case in particular, I wanted to give some context why this use case is so interesting for us meaning both Unibright and Concircle. It's not only from the enterprise integration perspective, our favorite topic, and not only from the base ledger, let's call it synchronization perspective, another favorite topic, but also about something that was mentioned very prominently when baseline was introduced, breaking down silos. So we will learn from Harry later that the case we're working on together here already includes a decentralized setup of network participants. It already includes SAP systems. It includes a Corda-based solution component. And this is also personally for me the exciting thing about baseline, that it now adds a synchronization layer, in our case here base ledger, to synchronize and notarize ongoing data exchange. So a perfect example for not just replacing existing technology with some fancy cutting edge promises, but for actual integration and how we call it in this project, for building bridges. Yeah, so now please meet Harry Behrens, founder, chairman, and CTO of Power and Mobility and of Bloxmove. Harry, the stage is yours. Let's learn more about Bloxmove, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I mean, and yeah, as you already hinted at, we've already been working with you and your colleagues from Concircle for quite a long while now. And just for, I'll keep it relatively short. So Bloxmove is a company that has a background in Daimler Financial Services and Daimler Mobility. So I founded and headed the Daimler Mobility Blockchain Factory, which is the first and probably one of the only dedicated team that applies decentralized technologies, blockchain among them, distributed ledger, but also very much decentralized identifiers, to tackle strategic markets as identified by Daimler Financial Services at the time. Daimler Financial Services is a company that lives off the life cycle of the vehicle. So within this Daimler group, you got two big blocks that manufacture stuff. Then you got a holding, and then you got the service company, which basically just takes a physical product, which used to be, my father still bought the whole car, and most of your parents probably also, and then came leasing. But more and more, obviously, physical products move towards servitization, where they get delivered to the end customer actually as a pay-per-use. And all big companies, all big asset-producing companies have these asset captive financer that basically try to take the physical product and make a life cycle product out of it, in which they cut the product into individual blocks, which are delivered as a service, with the benefit of course, having a much longer and much closer interaction with customers. Now, all of these usually start with financing and leasing, but then depending on which industry in, they become smaller and smaller from the granularity. And from financing to leasing to rental to car sharing to micro mobility, it's a clear trend of, the transaction gets smaller and smaller, the number of customers gets bigger and bigger, and the whole business model gets more digital and more digital, and therefore with higher degree of necessary higher degree of automation. Now, and this market now, one of the clear trends in our industry is that mobility is not perceived anymore that you have an asset, the car, but rather, especially in the urban space, mobility is a service where the service is not this scooter or that bus or this car. The service is, how do I get through this town from A to B or from A to B to C to D in the most convenient and appropriate manner? Depending on what my needs and demands are, I might be walking, I might cruise along with an e-scooter, I might cycle a little bit, I might cut across town in a trunk subway, I might ride hail, but my purpose here is not this and that vehicle. My purpose is just to move, mobility, urban mobility, mobility as a service. Long story short, that there's a big strategic analysis in all of the automotive companies that has clearly identified the future of what used to be automotive is mobility as a service. Now, I come back to this whole story about Daimler Mobility Blockchain Factory and why we were given the unique opportunity by the board of management to even create such a company. It was because you have fragmentation at all levels. So the transactions are getting smaller and smaller and more. The market and the product, you have now not one car and one brand, but you got this mode, that scooter, micro mobility, buses, several companies for each city. You got multiple cities, so it's splintering and fragmenting all over the place. And if you have an ecosystem which you analyze to be fragmented, then decentralized technologies are probably a good fit, because fragmentation, decentralization, they're essentially yin and yang. They're very similar. Fragmentation sounds negative, it broke. Decentralization sounds more freedom style, positive, but in essence, they express the same thing. So that is what we did. We applied decentralized technology, decentralized design principles to build a shared platform, a shared transaction platform, including obviously a shared ledger, to allow transport operators, the ones that are doing the physical moving, and mobility providers, the ones that handle the customer relationship, the apps roughly, to plug into this shared network and conduct business such that each of these mobility providers, they can bundle the services that are available, present them to their customers, sell them to their customers, and through the smart use of decentralized identifiers and verified credentials, give the necessary ticket and credential to these customers once, and then those customers just go chick, 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 QR code style, check into the scooter, check into the bus. Those credentials are verified like SIM cards, and voila, now I can do seamless, smooth roaming across services in all aspects of mobility, only having been onboarded once, just as each one of you is only onboarded once when you buy a SIM card, and then you roam whenever you travel. You're actually roaming through separate mobility providers. So what we realize is service roaming. So we apply this to urban mobility, but another thing that came out of this, by sheer nature of how we combine decentralized identifiers for verification of physical facts, for verification of physical parties, because on a blockchain is a tamper-proof record, which you can then afterwards say nobody tampered with it. But it is not a source of truth and will never be, because I can put a record in there. Harry Barons has become a billionaire. Boom. Or the moon is a green cheese. That doesn't make it true. So in order to conduct meaningful business with real world assets, you actually need to ascertain the physical truth of things. Meaning, has there been consent agreement? Has this charging station really delivered X amount of kilowatt hours at this and that time? Does the customer really have a contract with this supplier? Yes or no? Has the ticket or the access rights for this vehicle really been provided? And is the customer who's presenting that ticket actually the customer it was issued to? So those are physical facts. And this is where decentralized identifiers and the associated protocols called verified credentials come in beautifully to solve that. And in the combination of the one crypto set of protocols, it's also crypto protocols, like based on decentralized identity, and blockchain to do the secure transaction, and then a shared ledger, which in our case is a Corda, That is how we basically connected it. And we also have another part where in our collaboration with the Energy Web Foundation, but also 50 Hertz, we apply this to the coupling of the power grid and electric vehicles, where electric vehicles in the future will be able to be bidirectional charging to provide balancing power to the power grid. And as a short, more low-hanging fruit, there's a number of, once you couple the CPO and bring them into the mobility sector, and this is, by the way, why we call power and mobility, because we see ourselves as the company that brings the necessary technology to combine power and mobility. And the touch point is the electric vehicle with the battery inside and the charging station. Once you hook them up together, then the electric vehicle is actually a physical part of the power grid, while at the same time being contained in a physical asset, which is a mobility asset. And also here, the products that we are developing are all based on verification, on credentials, on proving that things happened, on collecting the billing records, and then putting them into the shared ledger. Now, and that brought us, and now I can hopefully give back, that brought us in close contact with this group here, because we are not a pure crypto, just crypto for the crypto's sake, but our customers, especially in Europe, will be corporates. And the source of truth, the final place where things hit the road is year-end closing, tax, auditing, balance sheet, and profit and loss is not counted in cash, and most definitely not in some kind of token. It's counted in your ERP general ledger. So as long as you're not able to, you can do these beautifully shared distributed transactions where transactions are completely counted and transacted and proven and put into a transaction record or even a subledger. But until they find their way into the downstream general ledger, they will never find their way into the profit and loss. They will not be recognized as revenue. They will not never find their way into the general ledger. So if you do not combine that which is downstream and will stay downstream, the source of truth for many years to come, oftentimes SAP, but any type of general ledger accounting system, you cannot claim to be providing a service that is truly seamless to integrate by corporate entities. And this is what brings us together here, because we saw, based on what we got to know each other, and this is where the match is, where we believe that using Corda as an intermediate subledger to share financial data among the participants in this subledger level, we also now need to make sure that each party can first easily exchange it down to the general ledger, where we see this integration with SAP as the first step, but eventually we do hope that the baseline protocol will actually act as a kind of shared message consensus providing message bus that will actually allow just basically then to go from the Corda, share on this baseline central consensus pipe, and then have the possibility to integrate with other enterprises without having to worry about how their respective backend actually is constituted. So that's what we do. I hope I didn't go over time. I tried to keep it short and crispy.
No, thanks. Perfectly fine. I mean, that's also the interesting part of what we call bridging, or what I call bridging in the introduction, because you clearly showed that there's not only a bridge needed between, let's say, concepts or perhaps even visions when you look at it from a product level, but there's so much bridging into the current state of the world if we think about the SAP systems and the hurdles that have to be taken until you can combine these two systems. And as you said, I totally agree. It will still be for years to come that, for example, an SAP system is the ultimate source of truth from an enterprise view. So surely for this project, the Concircle and the ConUBC especially was the main part to think how to bridge these two worlds.
Maybe also, Stefan, if I want to comment on that, just to keep the domain models, the data structures, everything was built up on Bloxmove level. Just let them keep their world, and therefore also this investigation with SAP.io comes in place, how to handle different domain models, different integrations like Bloxmove, so that they can rely on their data structures, just hand them over to SAP to unpack it there, and then you just book your records, whatever you want. If it's an account receivable, account payable, if you want to consume some kind of mobility budget for your employees or something like that, everything stays in the same model. And I think this is also one outcome of this investigation and will be investigated even further on SAP.io, so that we can, focus on the protocols, on the baseline protocol, to use this to open the world to Bloxmove. And yes.
We're actually currently undergoing SAP.io. So we're currently undergoing the Paris batch of the SAP.io acceleration. And one thing I would like to point out where I see the future. So right now we're doing, I believe that is already very much cutting edge. So we actually, in a way, it's point to point, or it's ring to its hub to its ring to downstream, where we basically integrate now into SAP. But one thing that we see ultimately being very, very relevant, and I believe that is something that the baseline protocol seems to be approaching in a very nice way, is that corporates, if you look at how corporates operate, you will always see their BPM, so their business process model, and BPM, business process network. So they basically, corporate processes are modeled in workflows. And every bank that I know about, and definitely in Daimler, almost all departments, they structure their work in workflows, and those are just state machine workflow transitions. And if you look at decentralized world, obviously that will not change. It will just be, you need more bridges for your workflow because it's not running internally anymore, but you need essentially I don't like the word universal very much, but you need a public or generally accessible workflow to really process transactions in the commercial world. And if somebody comes and says, not only do we give you a shared consensus, but we actually give you a way which is very convenient to model, very convenient to talk about, which is the BPMN world, the workflow mode, then that is very, very powerful, because I can tell you, for instance, internally, when we develop anything, the intermediate language of choice is a BPMN, a swim lane, because everybody understands a swim lane. You go to a businessman, they understand the swim lane, of course, but the developer understands the swim lane. It's a piece of cake to transform it into a sequence diagram. And for the business person, it's a piece of cake to map it to their business processes. So that very pragmatic approach is one of the things we believe has future. We only hope it will gain acceptance. It's not always the best ideas that win, but the idea is definitely powerful and very valid.
Thank you. So now back to you.
All right. Thank you all so much for that. So now we're going to shift to our monthly General Assembly updates, and I'll kick us off by going through the standards. Andreas was unable to join us.
Or am I allowed to stay?
You can stay.
Okay.
Please stay if you can.
Oh yeah, it's an open meeting.
Okay.
Yes. All right. So first I'll go through standards, then we'll go through sponsorship, core devs, roadmap, and outreach updates with the rest of our group leads here. So
I'll take the standards.
Okay.
Item.
Go ahead. Kick us off, John.
Was that the first one? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Standards. I think it's funny how different committees become heavy and then light and then heavy and light. Right now, the standards committee has kind of done its job, and we're in a more of a waiting pattern. We've got some things to work on, but clearly core dev has really grown. And I'd say that right now we're probably going to drop back a little bit in terms of the cadence of standards meetings, because we don't need to do them every week or every 2 weeks at this point. And that's going to change again, as we, get into the, later versions. There's still a lot of work to do, but there's not a lot of updating to do. So we're still on track. I think we've slow rolled a little bit, moving, pushing to The final ratification of the draft standard. It is in draft. It's all set. It's with OASIS, but I think that we want to see more implementations. So it's very heartening to hear about things like that. There's some other news coming out about people requiring baseline or coordination under zero knowledge capabilities. And the more we can get clients to come clean and say that they're using it, the better, because that's important. That's part of the standards ratification process. If a standard is not being used, it cannot be ratified. So really encourage everybody. I mean, some of the companies involved here were very early to, maybe even a year or so too early or more early than normally is normal in enterprise, because we've had those stories out for a while and, they're still in development. But I also know there are companies out there that are practically in production and aren't telling anybody about it. So if your client is like that, then, maybe it's time for them to at least let us know, so that we can get them into the standards ratification. That's all.
Awesome. And I'd just like to add that the standards group is working closely with the core devs now to complete a standards implementation guide and start discussing the test harness and test net. So the groups will be collaborating there coming up. All right. And next up, sponsorship updates from Carol.
Hey, everybody. We are super excited to have the new website. And I think that's going to help a lot with sponsorship recruiting, as well as educating the world, but just attracting people. And it gives me a much better place to point prospective sponsors to. So congratulations to the go-to-market team in Sonal for really getting that launched. It will feature, as I mentioned last time, a special section called Get Baselined, which will connect prospective buyers with our sponsors. And we will just connect them, provide the information for them to get together and let people who are looking for help, whether it's tools or services on Baseline, to connect them with our sponsors. So we're trying to collect information from sponsors right now to go on that page. And I've tried to reach out to every sponsor, but if anybody watching this has questions about that, please contact me directly. We will be launching that in the next couple of weeks, that page.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'll provide a brief core dev update. As John mentioned, the group is growing, and right now is a slow time in the core devs for some maintenance and housekeeping as we await the final roadmap from the TSC. So the core devs are working through some open blips regarding our repos and getting ready for an influx of new ones, which leads into the road mapping update. So I'm conducting some one-on-one sessions with each member, and we'll be wrapping that up towards the end of this week. And then in the beginning of March, we'll have a lengthy session with the TSC members to review the consolidated inputs from them and finalize a roadmap, which we will then publish on our repo. And we'll expect many blips to come out of that. But I'll also hand over to Samrat for some updates on road mapping and TSC.
Thank you, Sonal. So I think I'm very excited about the activity that you're carrying out, Sonal. Thank you so much for all the time that you're taking in conducting those one-on-one sessions. So we do expect very interesting inputs to come out, and I think everything is on the table. We're thinking of how do we better utilize grants funds to developing SDKs, to developing a test harness, etc. Getting more and more friendlier with developers as much as we can. And yeah, I surely believe that a lot of blips are going to come out of that March first week session once we present the final roadmap for this year. So yeah, that's it from the TSC updates. John, do you have anything to add here?
No, Samrat, I think all of us who've had the pleasure of going through those sessions with Sonal, I thought it was a brilliant idea that Sonal just went one-on-one with, or one-on-some with people. It brought out ideas that wouldn't have happened if we'd been on a big group meeting. And so I think that was just the smartest thing ever. And I think, we've got a bunch of money to spend, so hopefully we can get those boxed into blips and going.
Yeah, each session was super unique. I think there was at least one point in every call where I was just like, wow, that's a great idea. Whether or not it's in the roadmap, I know many people would be a fan of this. So it was really nice to get each member's flavor of thoughts on how we should focus efforts this year. So that was really awesome, and looking forward to publishing that.
I was interested in how all the best ideas were in my session, but I'm kidding. Just kidding.
Well, I'm glad my session was after yours, John.
All right. And now over to Mark Haddle for updates from the outreach team.
Oh, hi. So this past month has been an extremely busy time for the enablement and outreach team. We've, as Sonal mentioned before, and Carolyn mentioned before, we have put our website live. And this has been the result of a lot of, kind of brainstorming as far as, we want to look at it from, the perspective of the person that's going to actually visit the website to find out more, and that we can really spoon feed them and handhold them as far as saying, hey, this is a very elegant solution to a problem that you may be experiencing. And one thing that we're running into is, a baseline implementation compared to other type of platform installations is just so simple. I mean, it's almost when people say, wait a minute, what's the catch here? And we have to say there is no catch. It is really that simple. You're using your existing architecture. So, but one thing that we have, so the first thing we had was the website, and that's still going to undergo a few, iterations of refinement. We have a new member kit that's going to be coming out this week. We're still, putting a little bit of the finishing touches on it, but it's focused on community members, who join and, really want to kind of get some clarification so that they're very, very well versed and very just aware of everything that needs to be done on their baseline journey. We're also taking a new, expanding that idea and having a behind the baseline segment. And this is where we actually have, informational interviews with people who are, work in industries that really could sorely benefit from using baseline. And, we're also doing some internal refinements as well. We want to get our internal communications, really nice and clean and concise. It's really interesting because you see a lot of organizations that really, we're relying on Slack or Telegram or Discord really for a lot of our communication. And so we want to make that as seamless and user-friendly as possible. So we're doing a lot of, a lot of housekeeping items, as Sonal mentioned earlier, within the core devs. We're trying to, make sure everything is, nice and clean and easily consumable from someone that says, I want to find out a little bit more about this, but I'm naturally skeptical. We want to be able to, break that down pretty quickly. And at the same time, we are putting together, breaking down the outreach teams into a little bit more granularity so that we can, so we don't have too many people having to wear too many hats, because it starts to dilute, I think, the effectiveness and the overall output. So we're going to be, kind of subdividing the people on the team. They're going to be working on marketing collateral and sales enablement. We want the designers and the engineers, thinking that, okay, how is this ultimately going to be consumed by the end user? And we wanted to make it as intuitive and as seamless as possible. So, we have an open request to anyone that wants to come and get involved. We could certainly use your experience and your mindset and your input. Sonal and I, we sit there, we tell everyone we stand on the shoulders of giants, and we need, as many giants really helping us as possible. So that's really what we had going on right now. So,
Hey, Mark, this is pretty exciting. I can't wait to get, be able to have that deck, especially as there's a couple of more than a couple solutions vendors that are just kind of chomping at the bit to build baseline practices, and they got to start with a deck so they can convince their colleagues and their clients to go that way. But I wonder, how are we approaching, and how forcefully are we approaching, really bringing on and appealing to any company that's doing multi-party transformation projects, and any party that's doing cryptography and InfoSec, especially around zero knowledge. I should think that over the next 20 years, baseline is where all of those folks are going to want to be. They're going to want to be heavily involved, even more than blockchain companies and people like that, right? I mean, if you're in ZK, you're going to want to be on the baseline. So how do we make sure that we're aggressively pulling those folks in, making sure they know this is their home? And I'm working right now with Envision. I'm blown away by their ability to write zero knowledge circuits. And we're using Aztec, right? We're using TurboPlot, we're using the Breitenberg library, we're using a lot of cool stuff. All should be kind of wrapped up in the baseline bow. How do we do that? How do we reach out to
we basically use a multi-pronged approach. I mean, certainly on the website, I mean, there is a button on there that we're go ahead and join the community. We're only as strong as the community, and we want to make it as easy that you can sign up and come in and contribute. And if you have a lot of companies that are really starting to take a serious look at it, it would behoove them to have maybe a member or two on their team come and join the community and start to get involved and interact with all the other people. A lot of us that have been doing it going on 2 years now. We can get them up to speed very quickly.
Carol, isn't there a zero knowledge organization coming up that may be a sister org for us around Oasis?
We're talking to a zero knowledge organization. I'm hoping, ZK Proof.
Right. So they're pretty cool. I talked to them once. I think that's probably a matter of public record, but I thought that they were pretty sharp. And there clearly need to be standards around zero knowledge out there, regardless of whether those are deployed with blockchains or not.
Yeah.
Well, and zero knowledge really has made an enormous amount of strides within the L2 space, anyway, because it's starting to distill into almost two different approaches if you're going to be scaling, especially if you're Ethereum based, how you're going to be scaling your solution, through the roll-ups. I mean,
using ZK as a scaling solution, I would say, is not necessarily a baseline conversation, but using,
Well, but ZK, but you're starting to see, it's starting to distill down that you have ZK rollups and you have optimistic rollups, and each, it's two different flavors, and each would probably, have some strengths in some use cases and be useless in others. And so, doing the laps around the track, really is a way of finding out, which one works for each. So, but anyway, moving forward, definitely watch this space. We want to get as many people involved as possible. We're having a lot of content that is starting to come out and hit the social forums. A big shout out to Jack Wearing, who had this really cool little video showing a moonwalk by an astronaut on the moon. So kudos to that one. It's really cool. But I mean, it's one of those where we want to have the awareness out there, and we want to anticipate whatever questions people are going to have, about it, because, people say, why is this not a more complex, expensive implementation? And we're like, because we designed it not to be. You've already spent enough money on your own infrastructure. You're definitely going to want to keep it. And so, this is a way of making it better. And this is a way of actually creating value, not only to yourself, but also to your counterparties. And so everybody, does not need to worry about data reconciliation or the data sharing and all of that. They can just go ahead and go throughout whatever their workflows are. So, but that's what I had, basically within enablement and go-to-market.
And I just want to cover the behind the baseline point one more time. Jack Waring had this idea of having about 5 simple questions and a form that we could send out to people in the community and just start publishing frequent interviews aside from the baseline show. So we'll be starting that segment very soon and looking forward to all the different people we can bring in to that new segment. And that is all that I have for our official General Assembly updates. All of the community members are heads down working on various things and looking forward to the March updates. Hopefully there'll be some exciting improvements in the things we mentioned today. And with that, I'd like to open the floor to everybody else on the call. Any questions, topics, updates, or things you'd like to mention?
Well, the only thing that I would have to say that maybe, coming on the heels of what I just said is I am getting a lot of inquiries, for specific type of collateral that we're starting to work on together. And so, most commonly is, can you show us really an easily consumable, diagram as far as what would a baseline value compared to a non-baseline, the current services value, and how to, how to.
Not sure I understand that though. I saw that on the Slack the other day.
Yep.
What does it mean to be baseline value versus not baseline value? The value is the same, right? You need to coordinate with other companies.
Right.
You just want to do it with better security and less leaking of information. So it's the same use case in most cases, right? It's not like you have a baseline use case and a not baseline use case. You either, you can apply baseline as a technique to a use case or not. So I was hard pressed to think of how you would draw a Venn diagram in that way. I mean, there's other kinds of diagrams you could draw, but a Venn diagram was harder for me to think about.
Yeah, and I had the same thing. I don't think Venn diagram would have been the best, but I think that what they're asking for is, almost really a tell me why I should do this. I mean, it is a.
Do you have to give up information to other companies in order to coordinate, and do you not like that?
Right. And do you not like that?
You're good, right? I mean, it's a pretty simple conversation, right?
Well, from the process and procedural standpoint, but, at the same time, you're going to want to have somebody sponsor this, and you're going to say, well, how much money is this going to save me? And, in either process, waste or, added efficiency, Well,
it's going to save you process waste because you don't have to spend the time of emailing a bunch of people to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Right.
And that's priceless. And then there's also, the
Back
classic InfoSec conversation that, the cost of having a disaster when your information gets out.
Well, and then also, about 40% of, an organization's operational costs, really can be tied to that data reconciliation, trying to get everybody on the same page.
Yes, although if you don't need non-repudiation and you can do reconciliation without baselining, right? I mean, the question is, do you need to prove things about shared information to others without sharing the actual information?
Right, and you want to identify who is doing the reconciling. I mean, and do these people,
I think the core need I see is non-trusting parties. I think there have to be non-trusting parties.
To be synchronized.
I've got trusted counterparties. I don't want to give my data because I'm not sure that they're going to screw up and get hacked. That's really the question, right? I can trust you, but I'm not sure that when I give it to you, that your IT manager isn't going to make a mistake and that data is going to get out there.
Right. I mean, there are counterparties, and then there are all sorts of counterparty risk management audits and compliances, and this goes on. So I think it avoids all that. So I'm in talks with a company called EC Council to do that report. Maybe we'll present a grant proposal very, very soon for that. And I think what comes out of that report is going to act as ammunition for the next wave of people who are going to jump onto the baseline bus. That is something which I truly believe.
Well, and what we want to do with enablement is we want to, of course, condense that one person who is the interested party, but give them the tools that they need to then go take it to their team and condense them. We want people evangelizing. We want to mint cheerleaders, and storytellers.
Absolutely. Toastmasters. So, just like last time, last week we had this gentleman from HCL join us. So he's been talking. I mean, he's made 2 introductions since then. Since last Saturday within HCL, and that is a big company to have, right? To on baseline, I would say. So yeah, let's hope things go in the right direction. And yeah, a very big layer 2 protocol is also interested to be participating. So yeah, of course, there are tons of hurdles to cross before we can actually publicly talk about it. But yes, I'm glad we're garnering all that interest.
Yeah, and as John mentioned earlier, there are some companies who are digging further into baseline that we knew about that we'd like to encourage to fully join the community. And I was in touch with someone recently who mentioned that while they were explaining baselining to a client, that they were having an hour-long workshop, and the first 10 minutes was supposed to be about baseline, and by the end of the hour, it was supposed to show the architecture of circuits and like really get into it, and that they ended up spending the full hour explaining what baseline was because there was a lot of questions. So I mentioned to that individual that one of the most useful things they could provide back to the baseline community on that encounter is exactly what their questions were, what words and things tripped them up. Did they have like the pointer at blockchain in the first opening statements, or what it was? I think that would be huge at this stage to understand.
Sometimes I wonder if there's a two-edged sword. The word baseline is both the word good. It's good because it focuses the attention, but it also creates all those questions because it seems like, I got to unpack this product or this thing. If it's almost like you should go in, okay, this is baseline, and the first thing you say isn't the word baseline. You just say, look, forget about baseline. This is about zero knowledge, coordination under, under high information security. And then people are like, okay, I get that. And then you say, and there are the following techniques for doing that. And they're going to absorb it, right? But somehow when you try to pack concepts into a single word, people get very confused, right? Yeah, and so I think that might be it. Is they're like, well, I've never heard of baselining, so it must be complicated and hard for me to understand. But if you just say, look, there are some techniques for high security information coordination, and one of them uses zero knowledge, and another uses hash signatures on a message bus or a bulletin board. Then it's like it just kind of demystifies it all. I'm not sorry for calling it baseline. It was a pretty good choice in names, but sometimes I am when people overinflate what they think it is.
John, have you run into any issues with people trying to, or confusing it with project baselines or some other uses of the term baseline?
Not a lot yet. More that they think it's a product line. And that's got, and in a way, it's fun for me because that means I get to troll people who think it's a product line, and that's fun for me to go on Twitter and make fun of them. But that's, yeah. I mean, it's not a product. It's not a platform. It's not a coin. It's not a scheme. It's not a token.
Well, and all the, I guess, I wouldn't say competing, I'd say alternative solutions that are kind of emerging a little bit here and there, really around secure messaging or shielded transactions or, just hashing and stuff. They don't really accomplish what we think baseline could do, and they don't do it as elegantly just because I think they contemplate displacing part of the architecture. You've got to, tear out, and replace it with this new solution, which is always, a tricky thing. But, at the same time, I think they're trying to go on it with too much of a robust. I mean, it's almost like, you're trying to water your flower garden with a fire hose. I mean, it's way overkill for the use case. So baseline is a way that you can actually have a simple, way of actually setting up the mechanism so that you can synchronize with all your counterparts.
Mic drop.
Mic drop. That wasn't really a mic drop. That was just kind of a. I'm not going to say what it was, but. Who else has something?
Oh, we should give a shout out, unless I was distracted for a minute. Maybe this was already done, Sonal, but big shout out to the JP Morgan and White Prompt team.
Boris Breslov and team.
Boris Breslov and Luis
Using
Hamilton, who made that great the blog entry as well as the code for the baseline. I don't want to say grants, baseline bonds.
RFQs for bonds, requests for quotations.
Right, and proving, yeah, their prover is quite interesting, right? Yeah, because in bond, read the piece; it's very interesting.
Well, and the big thing is the bonding company, in order to properly price the bond, needs an enormous amount of information that you would not want your competitors or anybody sniffing around, becoming aware of. Not only what you're doing, but even your presence. We don't want you knowing that, hey, we've got something that we're, requesting a bond for. Well, what are you doing for? And if it's a large amount, hey, you must be doing something big. Well, you want to keep that as, on the down low as much as possible. And using Gnark, I think that was a great way of using it. I mean, they've demonstrated, shown. They're not telling us, they're showing us that this is how we can do it.
Yep. Another thing, so both for that one and for the Battleship game, Sonal, would be great if, and again, this is something we could pay somebody for, is to just make sure that that those don't become shelfware, and that people, I want to see tons of new developers. Maybe on the website, like the first thing is, hey, you want to figure out a baseline? First thing you do, go and play Battleship, right? So maybe it would be very good to really promote the hell out of the Battleship game, and then from the Battleship game, you want to get serious about it in a business perspective. Bonds, right? There's the bond thing, right? And so kind of get people on a progression, a train, so that we aren't having what are the examples, right? Well, here are the examples at right in the middle of the website. It's the very first thing you see. Go try Battleship. I think we're still a little anemic, if I'm honest, about promoting these projects. Although we're getting better and better every day.
Well, and what we're doing is we want to really also kind of, put a lot of stuff that, being mindful of the non-technical audience, the people that generally are going to be controlling the budgets and have the operational authority to say, hey, I need you to do this. They understand different language than the technical audience. And in fact, if you try and do some cross-pollination of that technical jargon, it's an easy way of actually kind of losing your.
Sure, but in this case, I'm really talking about technical, actual code, and making sure that newcomers are getting that in their hands and using it and going, I get it now. Mm-hmm. Right, that's what you want.
And we also want to put out and saying, hey, this is what your life could be like, if you start baselining. This is.
Well, that's the what you were talking about before. I'm talking about making sure that these technical projects get in the hands of new technical people, and that that smooths the road for developers to go, okay, well, that gives me ideas. Okay, now I've got code in my hands.
Yeah, there's a few ideas on how to execute that in these road mapping sessions happening. So I think we'll have a clear path forward on that. And one of the previous companies I was mentioning who's using or looking into baseline actually said that they really utilized the Battleship example and what they were doing and how they were presenting it to people. So awesome. That's super exciting.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Still open call if anybody wants me to edit video for those long sessions. Just give me the video and let me know what you want to put on the front of it, and I'll get that done. I got to put my new MacBook to use anyway. It's a beast.
You got a new MacBook?
The M1 Max is frightening. I think it's becoming sentient.
I agree.
I just totally, kind of envision you like unboxing it, like you're telling your wife and your kids.
Oh, I rub it with a diaper every day. Yeah. And I bought it a big 38-inch monitor. I didn't buy it for me. I bought it for it. It asked me, please buy me a monitor. Okay. Hey, I'd like to make one plug. Next week, ETH Denver, if anybody's going, lots going on. Please, if you have anything going on, you should announce it here. I will say that we will be, unless Andreas calls me tomorrow in the morning and tells me that it's too broken to launch, we will be launching it on Friday at I think 10:40 or 10:15 Denver time on the Temple stage at ETH Denver, and this is using zero knowledge proofs. This will be the first that we know of use of recursive ZK in production at scale on something as public as NFTs, where we basically prove that digital prints are descendants of an original plate, you might call it, in the effectively being able to protect the secret original while proving that every print, everything that you get to see on the web is a valid and authorized descendant of an original that you don't ever get to see, thereby allowing the person that owns that original to say, it's never been copied, and they have possession of a unique exclusive asset, while still allowing people to enjoy the work, the art. That's a pretty neat trick in the world of ones and zeros, where if you have access to a file and you can see it, you can copy it. I think it's brilliant. I think the work that Andreas and Envision did on it is amazing, and it's a great use of demonstration of recursive zero knowledge proofs, and the use of a deposition of zero knowledge proofs onto a public substrate. In our current beta, that's on IPFS for reasons of trying to keep things simple, but there's no reason we can't start moving those proofs over to more proper CCSMs in the future.
Well, and that you can have downstream exchanges, and that the person that either owns or created the original will then be compensated every time it changes hands.
Yeah, so that's my update about ETH Denver. Is anybody else going to go?
I'll be there, John. I guess I'll be at the launch.
Awesome. None.
We'll be there. All right, folks will be there.
Very cool.
Awesome. All righty. I know some people in the chat were saying the grandfather clock is coming soon, John, but I think we're ready to wrap up this February General Assembly. Thank you all for joining us and providing updates, and thank you all for viewing and following along. See you all in a month.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
one last thing is we probably did kind of blow it. We could have probably sent an army of baseliners to ETH Denver this year, and got them at the hackathon. I don't know why it didn't occur to me. I mean, I'm just, but I feel like a knucklehead for that. Let's make sure next time, and for the ones that are coming up in the spring and summer, that we've just got armies of people like Keith and Mark and
We have some soldiers on foot.
I'm glad that you guys are, but you're not there right now, right? You're not at the hackathon.
Not currently, no.
Yeah, so we could have had, baseline swag. We could have been promoting baseline work in that hackathon. And I don't want to look backwards, but it's a good lesson that there's a lot of stuff that we got to get ahead of.
If John, we wanted to pull the trigger on some swag and get it quick, I'd be happy to bring it out.
I'm bringing a bunch of stickers.
Okay, excellent.
All righty.
Amsterdam is in April. John?
Oh yeah, I was hearing about that. And then we also have ETH Austin in March, where I am. So I think the outreach team needs to start outlining the rest of the year, because it comes quickly.
We've got a budget. Let's just take action. Yeah.
Yeah, there's also a big EA event coming up in April, I guess. The Product and Services Showcase. So I think one of our sponsors could showcase their baseline work there.
I'm looking forward to the day that we're featured at things like Sapphire rather than a blockchain conference, but it's all good.
What about Coachella or South by Southwest?
Yeah, Coachella and South by Southwest are awesome. That's okay. All right, it's good to see everybody. I think that's the end. Thanks. Sorry, Sonal, for putting an append on that.
No problem. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Cheers. Was a pleasure.
Thanks. Bye.
Yeah.